everyone. I'm Harsha Ramesh, a student in Maastricht Management at Maastricht School of Management. Today we have my friend Sam, who's also a student in Maastricht Management at MSM. Hey Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. And how's been the study going so far?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, but it's been fine. I think it's about what has been expected for what you'd be doing in a master's, so not too overwhelming.
Okay. And I was just curious about your story.
Yeah.
What led you to MSM, and could you give me a bit of background? Why did you choose MSM as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I graduated from a public university in the United States, and I graduated with a history degree. And originally I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't do very well in undergrad, and so I ended up in public education and didn't love it. And so I was a personal trainer for 1 year and realized I needed a career change. And I thought the best way to do that was to get a master's that is business oriented. And so I applied to a couple of different MBAs and MIM programs, and I found the Master's in Management here in Maastricht through searching through different schools in Europe.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting background. And how's your experience been so far with MSM?
Yeah, it's really good. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, as a history major, there's a lot that's outside my scope of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not been too scary, but it has been really difficult. There are a lot of new concepts that I have to learn, right? We just had a supply chain management class, and that was the first time I ever used Microsoft Excel.
Okay.
So yeah, just like new things that like you would think would be very basic for someone studying business that I don't really have the background knowledge for.
Okay. And could you list out like few things which you like about MSM as well as you dislike about MSM?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned the supply chain management course. That's actually been my favorite course, right?
Yeah.
Because my father was a manufacturing consultant, and so a lot of the theory that we talked about in that course, I got to like speak with him about. I also really love, and this is a controversial opinion, but I really love that we have one course at a time. So at MSM, you have one course every 2 weeks, right? And you do like 1 week of in-class full-time, and then you do 1 week out of class for all of your personal work. And I actually find that it's much easier to focus on your schoolwork when you have one course at a time. So.
Yeah. And coming from US, what all are the challenges you faced moving to a new country as well as settling into Maastricht for learning at MSM?
Yeah, I think largely the Netherlands is a pretty easy country to integrate into for the most part. I'm sure other people have various experiences with that. But as an American, the biggest challenge I had coming here for study was that so in America we have the government will give you loans for both undergraduate school and graduate school, right?
Okay.
And so those loans usually only go to American schools, but there are some international schools for which they will give you the loan for. MSM happens to be one of those schools, right? Which is really nice. My biggest issue was you cannot bank as an American with a Dutch bank because Dutch banks would then have to register with the American Internal Revenue Service. So the American tax codes are extremely complicated and extremely annoying for foreign banks. So I had to bank with an online bank, otherwise I would have had to get my residence permit first. Okay, so that's a lot of information, right? So for me to get my loan, I have to have a Dutch bank, right?
Yeah.
So I had to get an online bank, and I wish I would have known that before I moved here because it did delay the process of me getting my loan. So that was a bit difficult. I also would encourage any American who's moving here, or really anybody for that matter, if you're gonna ship anything, ship things through like a reputable mailer or like shipping business. I've lost about half of all of my clothes by not bringing them with me. So the winter's been quite cold. But yeah, other than that, the big thing is get an online bank earlier than later because you can do so while you're still in the States.
Okay, that's a very new piece of information for me. So you already mentioned the supply chain management was a very interesting course.
Yeah.
Right? And what other challenges did you face in the few subjects we have had so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest challenges have just been like following along with concepts that are completely new to me, right? So like I never took a marketing class. We had marketing before our Christmas break. And so marketing was completely different, a whole new set of vocabulary, essentially a whole new language, right? I mean, it is quite difficult. I probably shouldn't complain about it being a whole new language because it's probably a whole new language for other people in their second language. So maybe not a fair complaint from my end, but nonetheless, yeah, it is just very difficult learning and not having any basis at such a high speed too, right?
Yeah. And looking at your experience so far, would you recommend MSM to your peers, and why would you do that?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I think if you're looking for a career change, we haven't had any business experience yet. That's all coming up with the SDG challenge, and I think we have some in-company work coming up later on, actually for our supply chain course in April-ish. And so this is all coming up later on, right? But I think that experience is going to be hugely helpful for building our resume, for getting new jobs or getting into new careers, or if you're in a career that you already enjoy, this makes you far more competitive and far more likely for raises and promotions, etc. So yeah, I absolutely would. On top of that, Maastricht is it's a beautiful city and it's super easy to integrate to. You don't need a car, you don't need a taxi, you can bike and walk everywhere. Yeah, I mean, other than the weather, there's not much to dislike about Maastricht. It's incredible.
I'm happy that you're enjoying Maastricht so far.
Yeah.
And do you have do you already set a plan? Did you already set a plan for your future after MSM?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I chose to get a master's to mostly open up doors, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if you ask me my plan directly after my master's, ideally I'd be working in a role as a consultant or an associate at a consulting firm. But this master's serves many purposes for me. So before I got my master's, I applied to be an officer in the American Navy and was non-selected. And so this makes me more competitive if I reapply later on. I mentioned law school. I didn't do very well in undergrad, right? So law schools look at your GPA and your LSAT score. So this kind of helped boost my GPA. It makes me a much better law school candidate. And then this also allows me to maybe get like a consulting job, right? A big boy job, as I'd say. So yeah, I think this just provides a lot more opportunities for me afterwards. But ideally I get, I guess, that big boy job right afterwards.
Okay. And what changes did you observe in the Dutch educational system compared to the American educational system?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think one culture shock Americans would have getting an education here versus back home in the States is that back home, like an A or like what we would call like maybe a 9 or 10 is kind of expected, right? Like you're expected to get very high marks or very high grades. That doesn't happen here, right? Like the average is the average, and you're in that top of the bell curve if you're not outside of average, right? And so like an American who gets, A's and B's are probably gonna get like what would be like 6s and 7s here, right? And so just for clarity, the grading scale is on 1 to 10, right? And so passing is 5.5, but most people are gonna be getting 6s and 7s, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Even I had a very different outlook when I experienced the Dutch education system. It was quite different for me from being in India. So that's nice. We got to exchange a lot of ideas. Thank you so much for your time for conversing with me as well. And thank you everyone for listening to our podcast.